Hi, everybody. All right, so we're going to move on to talking about how ecosystems can be sustained. So when you go out in the world, lots of organisms are pretty much in balance with each other and the world around them. And for that to stay stable, there are certain things that have to be in effect. And one is there needs to be energy. Living things use and process energy. We've talked about it all year, like with cell respiration. Processing energy is critical. And so there has to be a constant source of energy. For us, in most of our ecosystems, the vast majority, that's the sun. And then you need organisms that can use that energy. And of course, which organisms can use the sun and trap the energy from the sun? Plants or autotrophs, right? Different various kinds of organisms that can make their own food. And then we have to have not just those plants, but other organisms that can cycle materials back and forth as the energy pours in. So there's going to be a constant source of energy, and the materials, the atoms, the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, so forth, is going to move around from one organism to another as the energy is poured in and used by various organisms until it's used up. So materials cycle, energy moves through in one direction. So we're going to quickly make our way talking about various vocabulary. We're going to start with the energy and materials moving, where we have a whole bunch of different organisms with different niches, that is, jobs that they do. So what kinds of organisms make their own food, that is, take inorganic material like carbon dioxide and water and make organic material like sugar? That would be the autotrophs, right? The term that we use when we talk about them in relationship to others is producers. We have those that cannot make their own food. Instead, they have to steal the food from those that have made it. And those are the heterotrophs, right? Heterotrophs can include those that eat and those that take apart others, decomposers. So we have consumers and decomposers. And in that category, we have those that eat plants. Those are herbivores. And those that eat animals, we have carnivores. Carnivores eat meat, but there's different kinds. Some will hunt and kill their food, and some will find dead food and eat that. So we have different kinds of carnivores. We have predators. They hunt and kill their prey. That would be like a lion taking down a zebra, right? But we also have scavengers, which will eat dead things that they find. And that could also be lions, because lions are hungry and they're not that picky, but we consider them predators because they're such good hunters. But in truth, they can also scavenge. When we talk about scavengers, we're usually thinking of something more like a hyena, which more eats dead stuff, but the truth is they hunt too. So these terms are a little bit fuzzy, but they have general meaning of whether they hunt and kill their food or not. And then we have omnivores. So we have herbivores eat plants, carnivores eat meat. Those could be predators or scavengers. And then we have omnivores that eat both. Those are all separate from autotrophs and producers, right? So we have plants, autotrophs, producers. And then we have all of the heterotrophs, which can be these consumers or decomposers, who take organic compounds and return them to simple things. These are the recyclers. They're bacteria and fungi that break down organic material and return it to the soil. So working with those basic terms, producers, consumers, that include, or heterotrophs that include consumers and decomposers. So those are the players in a stable ecosystem. And then we have this constant source of energy, which is usually the sun, and the producers can use that energy. And then the materials cycle back and forth among all these different players, the heterotrophs and the autotrophs. Okay. So we can organize this into what's called a food chain. You've all seen a food chain before. A food chain shows how food, material, atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and all the other atoms that are in living things, how those move from one organism to another in an ecosystem. We're going to start with the producers because they're the most essential. They're the ones that are going to be able to trap energy from the sun and they are eaten by something. So the producer, the plant, takes in carbon dioxide and water, takes energy from the sun, turns it into sugar by photosynthesis, and then it sits there, right? It can break down that sugar itself by respiration so that it has the energy, or it can store it. And when it stores it, along comes a zebra and eats that plant, strips that plant right out of the ground, takes all those atoms that were in that plant, and now it's inside the zebra. A food chain is going to show the movement of atoms that were in the grass that has now moved into the zebra. We call the zebra the primary consumer because it's the first one in the chain that's eating. It's not the first one in the chain. First one in the chain is the producer. The first one in the chain that's eating is the primary consumer. The plant is a producer. The zebra is the primary consumer. Notice this is important. The arrow is moving from the producer to the primary consumer. That's a little weird. We think of the zebra walking over to the grass and eating it. So it would be very sensible to make the arrow go from the primary consumer to the producer. That's what we would think intuitively. No, the arrows represent something very, very specific. The arrow represents the movement of energy and materials from one organism to another. The atoms and the energy were in the grass. Now they are in the zebra. So the arrow points from the eaten to the eater. Now the zebra has all those atoms and energy now. And of course, that zebra may die of natural causes, but that's not very likely. More likely, a secondary consumer is going to come and eat it. So that might be a lion might come and eat that zebra. And so the atoms and energy that were in the zebra are now moving into the lion. So we have that arrow. Now we could have something eating that lion. That would be a third level or tertiary consumer. At this point, a lot of times they call them higher order consumers, and don't worry about the number. Now, if any of these things drop dead, boom, not eaten. Let's say they're not moved along in this food chain. Do their bodies, do their atoms stay trapped in their bodies forever, for eternity? No, they don't. Those atoms will be taken by decomposers, bacteria and fungi, that will take those atoms and recycle them into forms that can be used by the producers. So we can take all those carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen that are trapped in any of these bodies and move them. Notice the arrows point to the decomposers. Move them into the decomposers. Those atoms that the decomposers are rearranging can be used by the producers. And so the atoms can cycle around and around and around. The hamburger that you ate last night might have the atoms from the grass that the cow ate last week. And those atoms might have been inside of a mushroom. And that atom might have been part of a dead lion. And so we could take that back, and that atom might have actually once been part of a different zebra, and that might have been part of a different plant. And if you go back and back and back and back far enough, perhaps this little atom right here was part of a dinosaur, right? These atoms have been cycling over and over and over on our planet. They don't get used up, they just cycle around. What does get used up is the energy. The plants actually, believe it or not, produce their own heat, and they have to do things. They are growing and moving stuff inside their bodies, so they use some of the energy. So the sunlight energy that comes into them, not all of that is still in their bodies when the zebra goes to eat it. And then, of course, the zebra does some running and jumping and breathing, and his heart's beating. That all takes energy. And so all the energy that it did eat that was in the plants isn't still there for the lion. So the energy gets used up at each stage and is not recycled, which is why there must be a constant source of energy. So energy has to be feeding into this all the time because it gets used up. Atoms cycle, 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 cycle. And that is a food chain. Now let's look at this picture. What's wrong with this food chain? I first posted this and it's like, great, look at this food chain. And the student, Ms. Cohen-Norris, isn't there something wrong with that picture? And I hadn't even caught it. So you can't just go picking up stuff on the internet without paying really close attention. They'll even catch the biology teacher. So what's wrong with this picture? Well, the bird eats the caterpillar. Does that mean that the atoms that are in the bird are moving into the caterpillar? Heck no, the arrow is going the wrong direction. And so that's the case here. The arrows should be all pointing the other way to show the movement of materials. Now, these food chains actually are much more complex and can be represented as a food web. That's just all the different pathways that food materials and energy can move through an ecosystem.